Welcome back to Berlin. Now, tomorrow is 10 years since the collapse of Lehman Brothers triggered the financial crisis. It was this earthquake that was commonly associated with the rise of the far right in Europe. But here in Germany, the economy has been booming. Indeed, the rest of the Eurozone is in full recovery, and yet anti-immigrant populism is still very much on the rise. Across Europe, far-right parties are gaining ground. Last week, the anti-immigration Sweden Democrats increased their vote share as the country's third-largest party. Poland has seen regular far-right demonstrations and is controlled by the ultra-nationalist Law and Justice Party. The Czechs re-elected their far-right president early this year. In Austria, the Freedom Party is part of the governing coalition. It has roots in the country's Nazi past. Viktor Orban's increasing authoritarianism in Hungary this week prompted an EU vote condemning his government. Despite losing last year's presidential election, Marine Le Pen's nationalist front retains support in France and in Italy. The popularity of the Interior Minister Matteo Salvini continues to grow. He's vowed to change Europe by forming stronger alliances between the continent's far-right parties. But nowhere is the rise of the far-right more poignant and more alarming than right here in Berlin, Europe's powerhouse. The city is pockmarked with the bitter lessons of a dark history. Germany has worked hard at what they call Vergangenheitsbewaeltigung, or overcoming the past. There are strict laws against hate crimes, and yet the city of Chemnitz saw mass rallies with neo-Nazi overtones in August, and last week there were similar but smaller marches in Koethen, about 2 hours' drive from here. What's more, the anti-immigrant AfD is now the official opposition party in the Bundestag with 92 members of parliament. They deny any links with extremists, but we spoke to one extreme right-wing leader who believes that their party opens doors to his kind of views. Now, we don't want to give him any publicity, but instead we want to show how far these fringe figures now feel they can speak out. And you may find some of his views offensive. If the town of Koethen in Saxony was known for anything before last Saturday, it was music. Johann Sebastian Bach lived and composed here for 6 years in the early 18th century. And then there's this. No, not archive recordings from the Nazi era, but a speech given last Sunday. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, the rasping voice screams. It belongs to David Koethen, the notorious right-wing extremist. He and 500 other activists marched through Koethen after the death of a 22-year-old German last weekend. The German had suffered heart failure during a brawl with 2 Afghan refugees. The 2 Afghan men are now in custody, and the authorities are investigating aggravated manslaughter. But Koethen seized on the tragedy as yet another example of what he calls Germany's Rassenkrieg, or race war. Koethen has been investigated by the police for hate speech. He was barred from running for mayor in his hometown of Greiz. The manager of a building firm, he prides himself on being able to mobilize large numbers of supporters. His access to social media and PayPal have now been blocked. And that tattoo is the least shocking thing about him. At the speech that you gave in Koethen last week, you talked about a racial war. Du hast von einem Rassenkrieg gesprochen. Was meinst du damit?
Also Krieg wird ja immer gleichgesetzt mit Bomben und Granaten und sonst irgendwas. Aber Krieg kann natürlich auch anders aussehen, indem man ganz einfach dafür sorgt, dass man ein Land überschwemmt und leider nicht mehr unter Kontrolle hat, wenn, sage ich mal, viele Volksgruppen, die hierher gekommen sind, sich dermaßen, sage ich mal, in einer Aggressivität widerspiegeln, dass der Deutsche zum ständigen Opfer wird.
You talked about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Auge für Auge, Zahn für Zahn. What do you mean by that? Was hast du damit gemeint?
Ist ja eigentlich ein Vers aus der Bibel, ne? Und hat damals schon seine Gültigkeit gehabt und genauso ist es heute. Ne? Also man darf nicht vergessen, rein als verbaler Austausch sollte man auch jedem sagen, dass natürlich auf jede Aktion eine Reaktion folgt. Das ist einfach so.
And does that mean hunting down foreigners? Heißt das, dass eine Hetze auf Ausländer erlaubt soll?
Hat ja keiner gesagt.
No one said that, he told me. But the authorities fear the opposite. The extreme right in Koethen shouting National Socialism now, 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 which begs the following question.
Are you a Neonazi? Sind Sie ein Neonazi?
Was ist ein Neonazi? Das ist auch wieder so ein Ding. Ihr habt vorhin die Frage gestellt, Rassist.
Ja oder nein, Neonazi.
Was ist ein Neonazi? Heißt der übersetzt Neunazi? Finde ich nicht so. Ne? Das ist einfach so. Ne? Wir sind Patrioten und national eingestellte Menschen, die sich jetzt politisch engagieren.
Wie stehst du zu Adolf Hitler?
Politiker des, wie gesagt, des 20. Jahrhunderts. Ne? Was soll ich dazu sagen? Ich persönlich kenne ihn nicht. Ne?
Extremists like Koethen have been ranting on the sidelines of German politics for years. The crucial difference is that they now feel empowered, even legitimized, by what has happened in the German Bundestag. Alexander Gauland, the leader of the AfD or Alternative for Germany party, speaking on Wednesday.
Wenn dann viele dieser Flüchtlinge auch noch.
When so many of these refugees commit crimes, it's enough with patience. Martin Schulz, former leader of the SPD, was outraged. This is the kind of language we heard in this parliament a very long time ago. It is rhetorical rearmament, he said. Democrats have to speak out, and now. With 92 MPs, the AfD is the third biggest party here. It rose to prominence last year on an openly anti-immigrant agenda. And even though the AfD says it wants nothing to do with the extreme right sees it differently.
Does the AfD in the German Bundestag give you cover? Does it allow you to say things that you didn't say before? Gibt die AfD im Bundestag euch die Erlaubnis sozusagen, Sachen zu sagen, die ihr vorher nicht gesagt habt?
AfD natürlich Türöffner. Ne? Das muss man sagen. Spricht Probleme an, die
Türöffner für euch und für deine...
Für unsere Meinung, ne, sage ich jetzt mal. Ne? Es gibt sicherlich in der Basis, das muss man sagen, in der Basis Leute, mit denen man zusammenarbeiten kann, was wir auch gerne machen und damit haben wir auch kein Problem. Und
die arbeiten gerne mit euch zusammen.
Ja, das muss man sagen, unter dem Radar, das funktioniert sehr gut.
Back in picturesque Koethen, more marches are planned. Like many towns in eastern Germany, this one voted heavily for the AfD. And Bernd Hausschuld, the Social Democrat mayor, wonders how to defuse the political time bomb on his cobbled streets. Prayer is one answer, although who knows what match the hushed tones of goodwill are to the hard vowels of fear and loathing. In the congregation is Samir Juju, a builder from Damascus, a Muslim. Samir became a refugee 3 years ago and hasn't seen his 7-year-old daughter since he left.
I think they have to be a little more open-minded and not to be afraid of us. We have nothing against them, we appreciate them. They accept us. When our brother in the Arabic area, they closed the border in our faces. I could go to Mecca, it was nearest. But look at me, I'm sitting in a church now. But they didn't open the border for us. They let us down. They let us down. Yeah. I don't want to say that we are all good. There is a lot of people who doesn't want to be really a part of this community. And
is that true? There are some people who don't want to be integrated.
There is. This is a fact. I am sorry to say that, but this is a fact. There is a people who can't be a part of any other community because what you can say to the people who lived 50 or 40 years in their countries, speaking one language, eating one food, seeing the same faces, it's really hard to come to Europe. It's hard. When you are 40 years and you have to learn a language like German, which is a really hard language.
Have you learned it?
I learned it already, yes.
Sprichst du fließend Deutsch?
Ich spreche sehr gut Deutsch. I don't know why they are fearing from us. We are like 150 people here and they are 30,000 people.
There is a bitter irony in all this. When Berlin opened its doors to almost 1 million refugees 3 years ago, many in this country felt proud that Germany had shown up the ghosts of the past with an unprecedented act of generosity. But 3 years later, those ghosts are back with a vengeance. Germany is vexed, and the battle for its soul has taken an ugly turn. Now, we asked the AfD for an interview, but they were unable to provide anyone tonight. They are adamant that they have nothing to do with right-wing extremists or indeed neo-Nazis. But Chancellor Angela Merkel and her Social Democrat coalition partners have been extremely outspoken in their criticism of the AfD and the kind of anti-immigrant language they use. Now, the next big test for the AfD and indeed for all centre-right and left parties in Germany are the regional elections in Bavaria, where the AfD is snapping at the heels of the ruling CSU. It is Bavaria where the vast majority of refugees arrived 3 years ago. And who would have thought then how much this particular issue is transforming German politics?